Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the My Council Services webinar. Thank you for joining on what's generally a cold and frosty morning this morning, I think. What we'll do is I'll just give you a bit of an introduction and a bit of structure for the next hour or so. We'll have you on your way by 11:30, I would have thought, at the latest. We've got quite a bit of content to get through. And these webinars are designed very much as a introduction and overview session, and I'll talk about how you can get more information after the event as we move through. So in terms of structure for the next hour, a bit of an introduction, some recent background. I want to provide you all with an overview of the platform structure. So the platform being My Council Services, which is the product that Abavus develops, delivers and supports. We're going to give over most of the time this morning to a practical demonstration. So we'll give you a demonstration of the waste module and its associated functional modules on the platform, and I'll talk a bit about how we do Q&A in the next slide. I just want to go through a few frequently asked questions. Given the year that we've had in terms of COVID and the ongoing public health crisis that we've been managing, and in fairness that local authorities have been very much on the front line of, I'm expecting most folks on the line are probably experts now and past masters at participating in online meetings and events. We've all had to adapt in that regard because no face-to-face activities or on-site activities. But just a few FAQs so that you get the sense of how this webinar runs. We're going to be recording it. The reason that we record it is so that it's available after the event. We will follow up with you following the end of the webinar, certainly within the next 24 hours post the webinar, with a copy of the slides and also a link to the recording that we will have made. So you'll get a PDF of the slides that I'm sharing, and you'll have access to the recorded event if you want to share that or review aspects of it, having sat through the live broadcast. If you like what you see and you want to get into more detail and perhaps invite other colleagues from your organisation, we can do that. Just get in touch with us. And in terms of questions, everyone is on mute during these sessions. Traditionally, that was because folks were working in open plan offices, and often you don't have control over all of the background noise in your workspace. Now that I'm guessing pretty much everyone online this morning, and we've got a lot of people dialed in this morning, is probably working from home. You may have domestic pets, children and the like interrupting your workspace instead of colleagues, which would have been back in the day. So we put everybody on mute. But that doesn't mean that we don't want you to ask questions. So I'm ably assisted and supported this morning by my colleague Jackie Smith. You won't hear from Jackie this morning, but she's orchestrating events in the background, and Jackie will be your kind of contact point if you've got a question to ask. So to ask a question, just use the chat facility on the GoToWebinar console, and you can direct your questions either to Jackie directly, or you can broadcast them to the entire audience. It doesn't matter. You can go either way, and Jackie will do her best to answer those questions for you during the run of the session. Sometimes the nature of the questions is such that it actually requires a slightly more detailed answer, and the chat facility is not best for that. So what Jackie will do in that context is acknowledge a question, just let you know that we've received it, and we'll follow up with you afterwards to provide you with an answer. That will either be a call from me or an email exchange with me. But if you direct your questions to Jackie, then we can take Q&A as we go through. So don't be shy about asking questions. If you've got a question, please fire it off on the chat facility. As I said, if it's a more detailed one, we'll follow up with you afterwards. So that's some of the housekeeping. Let's get into the kind of main event then, really, and start to go through and think about and discuss some of the challenges that are faced by waste services and more broadly environmental services at local authorities. And there are a few things that mark them out. I think the first thing I'd say actually is that they are probably one of the more complex service areas in terms of the interplay of service delivery across the borough to what's often 10, sometimes hundreds of thousands of households that need waste collected and services delivered connected with waste and refuse. They have heavy implications in terms of physical assets and resources, vehicles, depots, all these sorts of things. And they're also heavily implicated, of course, in human resource, lots of people required to make sure that they run smoothly. So waste services in particular are some of the more complex and certainly some of the more resource intensive service areas within a local authority. And if you think about it for a moment, there are large commercial organisations that have built their business around doing refuse collection, refuse management, and so on. So for local authorities to do it internally alongside the significant array of other equally important services that they run is no mean feat. It's quite, it always impresses me when I see how that works for a local authority. So they're resource intensive, and also certainly recently under significant strain in terms of operational expenditure and capital expenditure. So they've been an area where councils have been trying to save money and make things more efficient. The other thing that is, I suppose, part of the perfect storm as far as waste services is concerned for a local authority is that they are highly emotive issues. They're things that we as residents, as customers of our local authorities, care about quite deeply. Generally, none of us are shy about telling the local authority if they haven't collected or been on time, or there's been some sort of disruption to the refuse collection service, because these services are important to our domestic quality of life and the quality of our local neighbourhoods. So they're emotive issues. So things like missed bins or disrupted collections, people are not shy about telling you about that, and they're often very high volume inbound call drivers. So there's something that ways of managing that from a digital point of view that you'll want to look at. Because of these two reasons, resource intensity and the kind of emotive nature of them as a service, how important they are as a service, that has historically sometimes meant that authorities have been, I suppose, cautious about innovation and making significant changes. So sometimes there's an apparent lack of innovation in the way that services around waste are organised and changed and developed when compared to some other service areas, and that's understandable given the profile that we've just talked about. That lack of innovation can sometimes lead to lack of automation, and that's a challenge because there are significant opportunities for automating the process and making sure that you're doing it in the most efficient and cost-effective way possible. So there's lots to think about in that regard. The other thing that I'd say about going digital from a waste collection perspective is it will give you much richer data. If you're running off kind of non-computerized, non-digital systems a lot of the time, you've got a paucity of data. If you start to move in the digital direction and bringing automation and digitization to your waste services end to end, you'll get a great deal more in terms of data, and that will open up a great deal more in terms of analysis and analytics, in terms of understanding patterns of consumption. So there's lots of ways that challenges can be met, and we'll try and show you a few of those this morning. Before we move on too much further, what I want to do is just give you an overview of the structure of the My Council Services platform as we deliver it and implement it. And the first thing to say is that the platform is modular in nature, and at a high level, those modules map to some regard in the way that a local authority is structured, and that's really what we've got in the schematic on screen at the moment. So at the top of the My Council Services technology stack is our self-service CRM and service desk modules. So these are really about the kind of first point of contact for customers, and they clearly have a role in the digitization of waste and environmental services, because waste and environmental services are significant drivers of inbound contact to your local authority. So if you can find more efficient ways of dealing with that, you're starting down the efficiency road from a waste perspective. So our self-service suite, our CRM suite, and our case management suite all fit into that kind of first and second level of contact that enable a multi-channel environment through which customers can contact you, be that via an e-form on a browser, on a desktop PC, or on a tablet, or via an app on a tablet or a smartphone, or even picking the phone up and speaking to people. That still happens in a service delivery context, and sometimes you'll be receiving unsolicited, unstructured emails from customers on topics. So you need mechanisms and tools to deal with all of those things. Sitting behind that then, from a My Council Services perspective, are a suite of what we call kind of line of business modules, and they're really tools that enable the development of more detailed digital capabilities, digital process and transactions, and the suite of line of business modules enable that. And a key one of those is our waste module. So the waste module aligns directly with waste and environmental services. Alongside those line of business modules, and I'll talk more about those in a moment, lie the integration capabilities. My Council Services as a platform almost never sits in isolation and unconnected to the wider digital infrastructure and systems infrastructure of your local authority. We're always delivering integrations, be that a payment integration or integration with and other back office applications. So it's an integrated platform in that regard. Alongside that, though, is also automation, and I'll talk more about that, and I'll show some examples of that as we move through this morning. So there's a suite of kind of back office functionality and capability that speaks specifically to the waste and environmental services area from a functional perspective. And then alongside that, and equivalent to that, is a suite of what we call our mobile worker tools. So that's really the ability to stretch the digital agenda all the way out into the unitary area, the borough, the district, whichever type of authority you are. When you're delivering waste services, how do you make sure that that digital contact point is available to customers up here, but also is available to your operatives when they're out and about in a vehicle on foot, delivering the services that are so important to your customers. So mobile working plays a particular role, again, in relation to waste services as a function in the authority. It's also pretty important, given the important nature of the services that you'll be running from a waste perspective, that you don't forget that you've got a customer that's on the end of, or at the beginning of, we should say, probably, lots of these processes. So having automation and rules and triggers of communications that enable you to keep customers up to date and appraised of what's going on with something if they raise a query with you is also quite important. So there's lots of components to this, and I want to try and breathe some life into that over the remaining 45, 50 minutes or so that we've got this morning. So that's a bit of a high level view of how the My Council Services platform maps to a contemporary organisational structure from a local authority perspective. I'm not sure how much my red scribbles all over that screen help, but hopefully the description I provided alongside them helps clarify things for you in terms of how we sit and how we fit in. What I'd like to do now is just expand out on a few of those. So I've talked about the self-service and CRM and service desk capabilities that are kind of that sort of first point of technology contact and multi-channel interaction with customers. That suite of modules is made up of different individual components. So it includes, for example, a full e-form designer. So you can deploy individual e-forms, and we'll show you some examples of those in a few minutes. You can package those up as a My Account enterprise interface, and again, we'll be showing you that this morning. Alongside that, and closely connected with both of those aspects, is a suite of native mobile applications, and we'll also take a peek at that in the next 45 minutes or so. And that can then be configured, the digital contact points, e-forms, My Account Enterprise, native mobile application can be configured to do lots of different things, offer security mechanisms for allowing customer access to third-party data. Of course, it's all GDPR compliant from a data protection perspective. So there's quite a lot going on in that layer in terms of feature and function, and the best way to breathe some life into that really is to show it to you, and that's what we'll be doing in the next few minutes. I then drop down the stack. We take a look at really the kind of the meat and drink of the waste solution as we offer it. So the core component of that is what we call the waste management module. There's a dedicated module that can hold your waste round collection database data and help you manage that and help that be used in innovative and automated ways to improve the way that you're delivering your waste and environmental services across the borough, district, or unitary area. But that waste management module interacts with and interplays with, and indeed is tightly integrated to, other functional components on the platform. So for example, we have a scheduling, bookings and appointments module. And as the name suggests, that allows you to, as a local authority, to deploy processes that allow your customers, so residents of the borough, businesses, individual residents of properties, whoever they might be, to make bookings and appointments. That's pertinent to waste because, as it turns out, there are a number of processes from waste perspective that you may well want to deploy as a bookings process. Think about the ability for a customer to reserve a slot for removal of a bulky item from their property, for which they may well pay you for the delivery of that service. More often than not, you want to allow customers to book a particular day, or perhaps a particular time on a particular day to do that. So that's the interplay of a bookings process and a waste management process. The same is also true of our license and contracts management module. So license, contracts and permit management, to give it its full name, again, as the name suggests, enables you to configure and deploy processes that speak to the specifics of a contractual agreement between the customer and the council. That could be trade waste as a commercial activity that the council might deliver. It could be allowing residents of domestic properties, residential properties, to sign up and pay for collection of green garden waste as a waste service that's often increasingly a paid for service with our local authority customers. So again, there's lots of examples where the pure play waste process has to factor in other more complex and sophisticated process requirements like bookings, like contract management, and it's important that you can get the waste data to interact with some of those other processes. The whole thing, of course, can be automated in terms of workflow through the integrated rules engine that sits as part of the My Council Services platform. There are various other components, but the ones that I've highlighted in dark blue there on the screen that you see at the moment are the couple that we're going to touch on today. And then finally, I just want to touch again on Mobile Worker. Mobile Worker is again a suite of functional capabilities. The key pieces that we'll look at today are Mobile Worker, so the assignment of tasks out to an operative in a vehicle or on foot that are connected in some way to waste and environmental services. So it could be, collection and removal of a fly tip, removal of a bulky item request in return for payment from a customer's premises. And then there's the kind of core in-cab capability of the turn-by-turn sat-nav functionality integrated with the waste data to enable domestic and recycling round connections from properties in the borough. So lots of ways that data can be leveraged and then deployed so that the digital capability extends all the way from the customer at one end through to the crew in cab at the other end. So you're digitizing the entire process and as many steps in between as is possible. So that's a bit of an overview of the platform. What I want to do now is just spend a minute or two just talking through a few examples, and then we will go and show a few examples so you'll see the whole thing brought to life, hopefully, will be the plan. So if we think about the entire waste process end-to-end enabled from a digital perspective, and I'll just go ahead and I'll just build this slide up for you and then I'll talk you through it. At the center of the waste solution, if you will, or the waste platform, or the platform deployed as a waste solution, is the round collection database. So that is the ability to centrally store, manage, govern and maintain all of that crucial round collection information. So that could be non-recyclable waste collections, curbside collections from all of the properties in the borough, could be recycling collections, could be green garden waste collections, could be trade collections, could be ad hoc collections. All of that data really needs to be housed somewhere. And My Council Services and the waste module in particular provides you with that secure, hosted, cloud-based environment in which to store and manage all of that important operational data. And it's not unusual, actually, when we speak to local authorities that are looking for a waste solution, that sometimes that data is still managed in an offline way in spreadsheets or maybe individual access databases. So it's far from the case that every authority in the country has got this kind of secure, managed central database environment for its waste data. That's certainly one of the things that we're working with our customers to improve when customers sign up to a solution like My Council Services. The point there really is, of course, you want that data accurate, clean, securely stored, but once you have it in that central location, it means you can do an awful lot more with it, and that's really where the benefits start to come back from the kind of centralized data warehouse around collection data. At a simple level, in terms of kind of operationally, but crucially important, it allows customers to have access on a postcode lookup basis to things like Know My Bin Day functionality. So you can give them a log on to a portal, or just the ability to access a screen on your web page that references that database and allows them to look up property-specific collection information for refuse collection services. Fairly simple, but something that's important to deliver, because it's one of those things that we're all prone to forget is actually when our domestic refuse collections are. So being able to look that up quickly and easily and interact with that data is quite important, and ensuring that it's up to date. And then think about things like contracted waste services. So that could be trade waste, it could be green garden waste where you're paying for that service at your property. It could be a range of different contracted waste services, but the ability to manage that, as I said, through a kind of contract approach with all the kind of implications around renewal and revenue collection and payment that are associated with that. You've then got things like ancillary issues associated with scheduled bin collection. So the ability to manage in an appropriate way things like Missbin reporting, and if you've got accurate data both on scheduled collections and perhaps live data on the collection as it's going, as it's taking place, then you can start to bring those two things together with the right technology to do what we would call enhanced Missbin reporting with automation. I'll show you some examples of that in a few minutes. And then you've got services that we've mentioned already that we would generally term as ad hoc waste services. So that classic example of that would be something like a bulky item collection, where you don't need it every day, you don't necessarily need it every week, but you will on occasion want to have that bed base removed or that old fridge removed, and you can generally rely on your council to come and do that. You're likely to have to pay for that as a service these days, but nonetheless it needs to be managed appropriately. And if you've got that central round collection database and the bookings capability, you can do those sorts of things. Natural extensions and ways to continue to use that round collection database are to optimize those collection routes. So we have now a route optimization and route planning and round planning module, and I'll show you a brief glimpse of that this morning. And that, of course, can then be pushed out to in-cab technology, so making sure it's available on a device, on the dashboard, or however it is in the refuse collection vehicle, so that you can really push that digital capability all the way out from customer, as I said earlier, all the way through to the crew in the cab. So lots of ways really of leveraging that central, clean and securely stored database. So at that point, with 40 minutes of our hour together this morning left, what I want to do is just step across and take a look at a live demonstration. So we might hop back to the slides to show you a few bits and pieces a bit later on and as we finish up. But right now what I want to do is jump across and show you some details how the thing looks in practice. And to do that, I'm going to share a browser screen with you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into effectively a demonstration instance of the My Council Services platform as a My Account portal. As I said a little bit earlier, you don't have to have everything organized into a portal if you don't want to. You can have individual forms live on your website that are fully integrated and branded, or you can have the portal on your website that's fully integrated and branded. But the way that you deploy that is entirely up to you. But just for the purposes of the demonstration, we're going to do that as a portal demo this morning. I just need to remember my login details and go ahead and log in. I'm also going to just shut my email down while I do that. So I've logged into the customer portal. I'm just going to tidy up my screen a little bit and turn my bookmarks bar off so you don't have to look at my bookmarks, and we can see the full screen. And that takes us into, in this case, a fully unbranded version and instance of My Council Services. The point there really is to say that when we implement this for customers and with customers, so with our local authority customers, and Abacus as a company only works with local authorities, we're not off trying to sell and implement the platform to anyone other than local authorities. We've built our entire business in that way over the last decade plus. But when you log in, and this is a non-branded version, this would typically be fully integrated into the .gov.uk web property that your organisation will maintain, and it will be fully branded and it will be a fully integrated component, whether that's individual forms or whether it's a web portal in the way that we're seeing it today. So having introduced the concept of the portal, let me just give you a quick tour of the screen real estate and the layout of the portal. On the left-hand side, you've got a fully configurable left-hand sidebar. So all of these options can be customized, turned on, turned off. You can have as many or as few of them as you like. The interface that is presented to a customer can also now be based on the profile of that customer. So a residential customer would see a different set of options perhaps to a business customer. And you could have variations in terms of the tools that are available. That could extend to something like a residential profile, a business customer profile, and an elected member profile. So you can get quite sophisticated in the way that you present the functionality to your different constituent customers. So left-hand sidebar with a fully configurable set of menu options that you can change at any time. In the center of the screen, you've got a series of what we call kind of hotspots, or widgets actually is the official term for them internally. These again can be configured to link to a particularly highly used form, a particularly important piece of web content that's referenced a lot by customers. You can basically kind of most common used items is really what the widgets are for. And then on the right hand side, you've got a series really of kind of first of all management information for the customer, so a customer can see all of their historic and draft service requests, contracts they've got in place, appointments and bookings. You can see from the case count up here, and we're logged in as a pretend fictitious customer for the purposes of the demonstration. They've obviously been quite busy in terms of creating service requests and signing up for contracts and making bookings and so on and so forth. But management data really on the relationship that the customer has with their local authority. And then sitting under here are a bunch of webhooks and connections to third-party data, which we won't be looking at as much today. But if you're joining the webinar this afternoon, we'll take a closer look at some of those. So that's the layout of the platform. Let's focus on some of the feature and function that's pertinent to the waste module. So let's start by just searching up for a form. I would say I want to report a missed bin. I can type the keyword missed into the search bar. The whole portal is indexed for search. So the first thing that I might want to do is perhaps report a missed collection. So if I click on that, that will take me directly into the form itself. And we can conform to the GDS Government Digital Service guidelines in terms of e-form deployment, and try and keep things as simple as possible. One of those aspects is a breadcrumb trail across the top of the form so that the customer knows where they are in the process. So with this particular form reporting a missed bin, we get some nicely formatted HTML information on this form first off that just explains the nature of the missed bin protocols for this particular council. And then the little blue button here that says select the collections, that's your first indicator of using a form plugin. In this case, it's the Missbin plugin for the form. And what that's actually doing is it's doing two things. It's taking known previously registered information for the customer, in this case, the customer's address, the pretend customer's address at 78 Grove Hill in the London Borough Redbridge. And it's then saying, well, given that I know where this customer is registered in terms of being a resident and where they live, I can then retrieve the data that relates to the refuse collection that are assigned to their property. So in this particular example, my pretend customer, a chap called Gary Wilcox, has clearly got a big garden because he's got an awful lot of garden collection containers that are available to be collected. But the point here really is the rules that run alongside it, so the message that runs alongside it. So there was a collection on the 9th, there's a collection coming up on the 9th of December, which is tomorrow, but prior collections that are more than 3 days ago can no longer be reported as missed. So there's a set of rules running in the background here that again can be configured that allow for a customer either to have a permissible missed bin or a non-permissible missed bin. So if they're in contravention of any of the criteria, then they can't report that as a missed bin. So if we want to report yesterday's collection as missed, we can select it and click on continue. It will write that missed bin request into the transaction. It gives the customer an option to upload a photo if they wish, and then we can just click on next, and it will then package up that data, and that can then be submitted. So the point here, folks, really is that what we're doing is using the interplay of different sets of data that we have access to, information about where the customer is resident, where they live in the borough, access about their registered refuse collection services, so accessing the round collection database, and then wrapping a set of rules around that that says, well, if the collection's still out, it's before 1 p.m. on the day of collection and you can't report it. If it was reported by the crew as contaminated, we can feed that back in real time and stop a missed bin report being made. There's lots of ways that if you want to, you can create quite sophisticated rules around the admissibility or permissibility, I should say, of missed bin reporting. And that is, it may sound quite trivial, but actually missed bin reporting is one of those very high volume inbound contact reasons for calls into call centers. And if you can do anything to whittle that down a little bit to allow customers to use self-service environments to reduce the amount of inbound calls, that's got to be a good thing from your channel shift program perspective. So that missed bin has now been reported. The other things that we might want to do is just look up the bin collection schedule for my property. So if I click on Know My Bin Day, I then get a postcode lookup selection. So if I put in, and we've given the option in this example to look up my own postcode under Gary's pretend profile in this example, or you could look up maybe an elderly relative who's maybe not comfortable using the internet in this regard to look up their refuse collection. So if you want to remind them and check on their refuse collection, but we can do a postcode search. So it's referencing, in this case, the NLPG, the National Land and Property Gazetteer, and it will then match that to an appropriate and bona fide address. So we select that address and we click on go, and that then gives us, returns to us all of the data, refuse collection data for that particular property. So there's a number of things going on here. We can see all of the collection types that are registered at this property, recycling and garden collections. I can get a full view of the upcoming collection calendar including things like exception days. So lots of detail going on there. So I no longer have to, I could print that off and stick it to my fridge if I wanted to, or in fact what I can do is I can download that as a PDF. And if I want to really get into the 21st century, I can download that as an iCal, series of iCals, and it will then integrate it into my digital calendar, so on my smartphone, on my tablet, on my PC. So it's a much more contemporary way of having access to your refuse collection calendar. So it removes the need necessarily to print something off, either the council doing that or you doing that at home, then sticking it to the front of your fridge or your kitchen notice board, and it should consign to history the kind of the classic routine of looking out your window on a given morning to see if your neighbours have got the bin out and what bin they've got out. So the ability to interact with that waste data in a digital and contemporary way is kind of part of the process. So you can start hopefully to see the idea and the benefits, the multiple benefits that are derived from having that centrally stored and organized round collection database sitting on a platform that then allows you to deploy that in lots of different directions. So we've done a couple of things so far. We've reported a Missbin with some rules wrapped around it to make sure that that is an appropriate report of a Missbin at an appropriate time. And we've interacted with the waste data just to look up the refuse collection calendar. So let's go and do a couple of more kind of detailed things. Let's go and do a kind of book it routine this time. So I'm going to select on book it, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to request the bulky item collection. So I'll talk you through this process. So we're into a kind of slightly more sophisticated or complex process at this point. You still get your breadcrumb trail across the top, so you can see what's going on up here. You can see a little bit of information about the bulky items service. It's between 7 AM and 3 PM on the day of collection. You can only book it up to 3 PM on the day of collection, so on and so forth. So we're in good form in that regard. And we then get another little button that allows us to select the collection date. So if I click on select, that's using the waste plugin as part of the waste module. And it's doing a couple of things again. So it's leveraging data that it already knows about Gary, my pretend customer that we're using as the guinea pig for our demonstration this morning. He's addressed at 78 Grove Hill. It then interacts in an intelligent way, in inverted commas, with the refuse collection data for bulky item removal. And this is an example actually that we've taken from one of our customers in the way that they've got their bulky item process set up. So it's just an example of the way that you could configure it. And in this example, the collections for bulky item removal from residential properties is zoned, so it happens on different days of the week in different parts of the borough. You don't have to do it that way. It's just one example of the way that this customer set it up, and we thought that was an interesting example with a kind of enough sophistication in it to warrant demonstrating in context like this. So only the days on which there's a collection at Gary's property are presented back to Gary in terms of being able to book. So if he's available on the 14th of December and he wants to be around when the collection is made, he can collect the date and he can confirm that date, and it will then return to him either the available slots or the availability of slots on that given date. So there are slots available. There's not a specific time in this example. It's between 9:30 in the morning and 4:30 in the afternoon. So if Gary wants to select that, then there'll be another layer exposed in terms of the way that this is organized as a collection regime. This is a charged for service in this example. And what Gary can do, my pretend customer, is he can then choose particular items. So he might say, well, I've got electrical appliance to be removed, and that's a freezer, let's say. And what you'll see then is it's doing a number of things in terms of the process. It's picking up the property address. It's using the location of that property address to interface to the waste data and giving the appropriate available collection dates. And then it's drilling down into the commercials of the transaction, because this is a charge for service. So, and we've deliberately left some of these variables visible. You can hide them if you wish, but a freezer has got a cost weighting of 1, so that's £6 for removal. So Gary can start to see then the charges starting to layer up in terms of the number of items that he might want to be removed. If he wants to then add an item, and he'll say, well, actually, I've got a double bed that needs to be removed, so that's a piece of furniture, and I'll select bed. That's an item with a weighting of 2, so that's a more expensive item. So you'll see the cost gradually building up. I think in this example, there's a maximum of 6 items, and then it tops out. We can also use metadata about the customer and the collection from that property to enable things like using assisted people that are registered for assisted collection. So if Gary's eligible for an assisted collection, which he is in this case, you can select that and he'll get some extra service. He'll come into the property and remove the items for him if necessary. So you can use, what you're really doing here is leveraging the available data to make the process as efficient and as automated as possible. That's really kind of it in a nutshell. So if we're happy with that, we click on proceed, it will write those transactions back in to this particular set of activities. Then we click on next. The next stage in this particular transaction example is to add evidence if you want to. You may or may not choose to do this, but it's just to show the art of the possible. So if you want the customer to upload a picture of what needs to be collected, you can allow that to happen, so that you can control the number of files, the size of those files, the permissible file extensions, so on and so forth. So we'll just allow that to upload. And then the next stage that we'll be taken onto in just a moment is actual payment. So this is a paid for process. So you can start to see, hopefully, with this example, that there's quite a lot more going on. It's the third transactional process that we've run through in the last 15-20 minutes. So we looked at just reporting a Missbin first of all and using data about the collection to make that effective. We then looked at a bin refuse collection lookup and interaction with the calendar, and this has now got a few more moving parts: bookings, interfacing with the collection days, and then the next step will be payment. So this is really the first point of integration to an external third-party application, and what we're integrating to here is a payment gateway. And we've done a lot of payment gateway integrations over the years. They're probably a feature, I would say, of 95% of the implementations that we do, if not 100% these days, where we're linking My Council Services and allowing it to do a secure handshake with the payment gateway technology that your council is using. We're using a Barclaycard payment gateway here just as an example, because I offer a freely accessible test version that we can run in demo mode like this. But we've done lots with Civica and Capita. We've also done quite a lot of integrations in terms of direct debit setup and payment collection. So things like Bottom Line and Go Cardless that are able to do DD setups. In this example, we're just doing a payment, a debit card or credit card collection. So it's picking up the order reference from My Council Services, it's picking up the charge and the beneficiary details. If I then just click on the appropriate card, you're just really into the realm of standard, online shopping, which you've all probably done plenty of this year, I would have thought. I've got a little test card number that I can use, putting in an expiry date at some point in the future, and a made-up CVC code, and then confirm my payment. So everything I've done in the last few clicks and types is directly integrated and interfacing with the payment gateway technology. What My Council Services has done is a secure handshake with that payment gateway, handed over some of the appropriate information in encrypted format, allowed the payment gateway to do its thing, and then once the payment gateway has done its piece, that then hands the transaction back to My Council Services. We're doing this as an online payment, so Gary, as the customer, is completing those details. We can also enable things like chip and pin, card holder not present transactions. As long as your payment gateway is able to support any of those different remote payment formats, then we can integrate that into our process. So it's a constraint of the payment gateway capability rather than our platform. But you can have lots of different format payment types for collecting money either in person, card holder not present, as I said. So we've done the payment, payment's been accepted. We then click on next, and you then get a confirmation of that process being completed. Gary then, as the customer in this case, gets the opportunity to review everything that he's created in terms of that particular transaction. He can then go ahead and submit that data. So that's submitted. Gary's then in the position to continue either transacting via the portal in any way that he wishes. But what we'll do at this point is just take a look at a couple of things, and then we'll go and start to take a look at the back office from a waste perspective. So what I will just mention at this point, I've talked about the kind of management information that's available for customers to see. So if I click on service requests, you can see that the special collection, the Missbin that Gary reported at 10:58 this morning, and then again at 11:08 for the special collection, are now available for him to see in terms of his own management information and access and visibility of data and interactions with the council from his perspective. So if there's a change to the status of that, Gary can go in and see it. The other thing that can happen, of course, is automated notifications around that capability. So lots of information and lots of ways of keeping the customer up to date. So that's a bit about the kind of self-service side of leveraging that waste data to good effect to ensure automated, easy to use and easy to navigate processes for customers. So what we're going to do is take a slight change in direction at this point. And I'm going to jump across to a slightly different browser interface. So you should all be seeing a log on screen again on screen now that I'm sharing. And what we're doing now is we're going to log into the back office environment for My Council Services. So just to be clear about this, everything that we've done in the last 20 minutes or so has been the customer using waste processes that have been deployed to a customer portal or an e-form in this example to allow them to do things in a self-service context. What we're going to do now is dip into the back office environment and take a look at some of that feature and function from a case management and a process management perspective. So that requires me to log in again. So I'm using my Abavus email address to do that. Remember my login credentials. And that takes us into the My Council Services back office. So as with previously, where we were operating as a customer, doing things for ourselves, we were doing that via a browser. We could do that from any screen. We could do that remotely. So the same is true of the back office environment. My Council Services is an entirely cloud-based service. So it's hosted in the UK, but it does mean that everything's entirely accessed through the browser, so that you can really effectively work from anywhere from an operative perspective. So we're looking at Service Desk, and Service Desk is really the kind of the primary case management application within My Council Services, and we're getting a tabular view of all of the waste cases. If I just click on this options button here, I can actually scroll through and see all of the different functional areas where we've got forms and processes running. But we're just defaulting to waste in this example, and we can slice that down just so that we look at just special collections if we wanted to, and we can refine that search a little bit so that we strip out every other. And you can see that the special collection that Gary created today at 11:08 is sitting there. We know who the customer is, but if again, I'll just recut so that we see all of those waste processes, which will include Missbins and so on and so forth. And if we then drop down into the detail of that, so I'll select this Missbin collection that was created by Gary at 10:58 this morning. And if I just drop into that, then that takes us into the detail proper of that particular case. And we'll be able to see, once that screen refreshes and displays for you, all of the detail around that particular transaction. So we can see all of Gary's details. We can see it at the top of the screen here. And we can in fact click through to Gary's customer record if we need to. We can see information about the items. We can see any pictures that were uploaded. We can see the location of the miscollection. And then we've got the tools on the right-hand side to manage all of that. So if we want to make changes to it, we want to add a document to the transaction or a note or an interaction, we want to create a task off the back of it. We want to link it to another transaction. Maybe there's been a spate of missed bins at this property and it's being consistently missed by the crew, or perhaps the customer is reporting missed bins when perhaps they shouldn't. They're gaming the system a little bit. You've got all of the ability to kind of add in those transactional details. You can view the full history. So if there was ever a discussion or a question asked about what happened with a particular case, you get a full digital audit trail of everything that's been done, both by a human user, a real person, be that the customer or a council officer, and also things that have been done by the system. So the automatically assigned out to an owner, someone that's going to go and deal with that misbin, for example, or a particular crew. So you see everything that's happened to it. We can update status, we can send an email back to the customer. So you've really got all of the kind of case management tools that you're ever likely to need in order to manage those transactions in a manual way. And of course, What I should also mention is to say that everything that you can do manually can also be baked into a set of rules. So we'll go and take a look at that in a moment. But that gives you a sense of some of the case management capabilities that exist within Service Desk. Just a couple of other bits and pieces while I'm on the Service Desk interface. We're looking at a tabular report here of all of the waste transactions. I can also get a map-based report of that. So if I want to look at that data spatially, and if I've got the privileges to do so, I can click through and I can actually see the details associated with that. So we can see any particular transaction, and I can drill through to that as long as I've got privileges to see it. On that note, in terms of data privilege and accessibility, everything within the platform is governed by a module called role-based access control. As the name suggests, that means that based on your profile as a user, that gives you certain privileges that either enable or inhibit, constrain your ability to see functionality on the platform and access that functionality, and crucially, to access and see data on the platform. So you can really kind of narrow that down or have that quite broad, dependent on the nature and role of the individual. As well as a spatial view of that data, I can also get a traditional kind of reporting view of that data. You've got lots of options in terms of real-time reporting, which is a theme I'll return back to as we kind of bring things to an orderly conclusion in the next 15 minutes or so. So that's a quick view of Service Desk. What I also wanted to try and show you this morning is a couple of bits and pieces on the remote device, just so you can get a sense, albeit quite briefly, of what that looks like from a mobile working perspective. This is going to be a bit of a gallop through because we've still got a little bit of ground to cover in a limited amount of time. But I want to show you a couple of things, if I may. To do that, I need to share with you my my tablet screen. So I need to use a little bit of third-party technology to enable that to happen. So I'll just start that up now, see if we can get that working. Bear with me just a moment while the technology catches up. I'm just going to drag that onto screen now, and hopefully you'll see that. So you should all be seeing a mirror of it's actually an Android tablet, a Galaxy S5. I'm just going to show you a couple of things very, very briefly. I'm just going to want to draw your attention down to these couple of apps down the bottom here. So we're running on a native mobile application at this point, and I'm just going to tap on the one to the right here, and I want to draw your attention to the mobile worker functionality. So that's the icon where I'm hovering my my mouse at the moment. So this is using the native mobile app that comes as part of the kind of customer self-service suite as part of the My Council Services platform that enables operatives, trusted users, members of staff, contracted members to access their task list online, or on a device, I should say. The beauty of it being a native mobile application, what it means is that can actually be accessed whether you've got signal or not. So because it's a native mobile application, it enables true offline working as well as online working. So you need a connection to download your latest task list, but you then don't need to maintain that connection if you want to go in and update that. And one of the things that you can see is that Missbin that Gary reported at 10:58 this morning on the 8th of December, the topmost on that list, is available on my task list because it's been assigned out to me. I can see the photo of the Missbin, I can see the location of it. If there are particular tasks associated with it, I can see them. So that's a very, very quick look at the mobile working capability on that. The other thing I'm going to show you just very briefly is some of how that translates into the in-cab capability. And I just want to draw your attention to Waste Worker in this example. So that allows us actually to download. So if I go into the topmost left-hand menu option and I was to select Get Waste Data, I could download the round information for the day. And then having done that, that would then appear on screen. And then what I can then do is I can click on the map view of that, and it will launch the turn-by-turn sat-nav capability that's part of our in-cab capability, and it will tether that to the round collection information that we've just downloaded. This is actually some collection data from Newport City Council, just a test set of data. And I'm actually over on the East Coast at my home office today, over in sunny South Norfolk. But what I can then do is I can use the sat-nav to get me to navigate all the way through to the collection point. So if I just turn it into demonstration mode, and then we speed it up a little bit, let's speed it all the way up to 1600%, and you'll start to see the vehicle move off. And if I zoom out a little bit, It's exactly like using the sat nav in your car, but what it's doing is it's interacting with the waste data that we've downloaded. So it's the interplay between My Council Services storing and maintaining and managing that data, making that data available securely and remotely for a collection by the crew in cab, and then providing all of the tools that a sat nav would typically provide. In this case, we've got a ridiculously long drive to start our route, and we're going all the way across country. If I just select an option, that data has got added to it all of the metadata that you would expect to have around that waste collection data. So if I get to a collection point and that bin is presented, or it's not present, or it's contaminated, or whatever it might be, I can flag it as such, and that is then fed back into that round collection database in real time, allowing it to be used as part of the reporting and the intelligent Missbin reporting. So that's a very quick taster of the way that the in-cab capability can be set up and displayed for enabling collections. The same sat-nav capability and turn-by-turn navigational capability can be applied to ad hoc collections, things like bulky items, or maybe trade waste that might change from week to week as people sign up and sign off on their contracts. But you've got that ability to extend digital intelligence, including sat-nav capability, with all of the appropriate route hazards and warnings and so on and so forth that can be used in cab by the crew. So that gives you a little bit of a taste of some of the remote and mobile working capabilities. I'm conscious of time, and we've got a fair bit of ground to cover still in the last 9 minutes that we've got together. So I'm going to drag that particular screen out of the way now, and we're going to come back to the My Council Services back office. And what I want to do is just give you a little bit of a peek into the detail that sits behind some of that waste management module capability. And to do that, I'm going to take you across to the waste console. So we're still in the back office, but we're going to just spend the last few minutes that we've got together getting into a little bit more detail about some of the feature and function and capability that sits behind the waste module specifically. So we take one step further back into the detail. We click on the waste console, and that then enables us. The waste console really gives us a peek into the database proper, so it gives us ways of accessing that database. And what I want to try and do is just illustrate the kind of power and flexibility of the route optimization that we just saw in action on the tablet there, with the sat-nav turn-by-turn capability running on an optimized route. And to do that in the waste console, I'm going to click on action, and specifically I'm going to go down to round management. So if I select on round management within the waste console, that will bring a particular screen up for me that allows me to go and show you what a non-optimized route looks like versus an optimized route. So first off, I'm going to select a collection type. So I'm going to select the domestic collection that we were just looking at on the mobile device. That is a Thursday collection. It has a particular round number associated with it. And I'm going to go and look at it on a particular day. So I've got two examples. One is a non-optimized route that hasn't been run through our optimization and route planning optimization engine. And if I just spin back in time a little bit, because I've got a couple of kind of pre-prepared examples from July of this year. I'm going to select the date for the 16th of July and then click on go. What that effectively does is go and query the round management, the refuse database, and it retrieves the data associated with that particular set of criteria. Domestic collection on a Thursday with that round number on that particular day. And we'll see all of the individual properties are listed, house number, collection type, so on and so forth. And in the leftmost column, you've got an order number. There's no order assigned in that example, which would suggest that the route has not been optimized. So I could, at that point, if I wanted to, click on optimize, and it would take all of the data, all of the information around that particular set of collections, in excess of 1,000 collections in this example, and it would then run the optimization algorithm against it. I'm not going to do that in this case. What I'm going to do, though, is show you what the chaos that a non-optimized route looks like, and what the challenge is that the optimization algorithms that we have access to and that we deploy as part of our route optimization capability have to figure out. And if I zoom out on that, you'll start to get a sense of it, because the round optimization takes all of the different collection points. It's about 1,100, I think, in this particular sample set, and it does all of the distance calculations and travel calculations from a particular base point, where typically the depot for a round. So that's what that's what a non-optimized round looks like. And what I'm going to do now is try and to bring some order to that relative chaos by just changing the date and showing you an optimized route. So I'm going to flash back across this time to the prior week, which is the 9th of July, and just let that refresh. And what you'll see now is effectively the same set of data, but on a different day. So there might be slight variations, but this time every property has a particular order number, and that's because the route optimization algorithm has sorted through it item by item, looking at all of the associated road data, risk data, road hazard data, all of the vehicle data, all of the appropriate and pertinent information to build that into an optimized route. And if I then flash that across into the map view, you will see that it will have brought significant order to what was previously quite a chaotic setup in terms of route and planning. So we've got a much less of a spaghetti soup going on, and much more of an ordered, optimal, and crucially important, efficient route automatically planned for you. It's also possible to interact with these things manually. So if you've got particular pieces of local knowledge and you want to override something at the end, the optimization engine has done, that can also be done. So you've got round management options in there to put particular collection points in to deal with one-sided collections or back alley collections or whatever they might be. But we can also see there's some data that's presented for us that says this route was last optimized on the 16th of July. If I click on statistics, I'll then get a window that tells me exactly how many drops, i.e. properties, there are in this example, how long it would take to run as an end-to-end job in real time, how many kilometers would be covered, the start time, the finish time, and again, all of these variables can be adjusted. So there's an awful lot of detail that sits behind this, but what I wanted to try and do as part of the kind of the gallop through the waste functionality this morning was just to give you a sense for all of the kind of different components and the ability that sits behind the route optimization capability. But also, if you need to, if you suddenly find yourself completely without internet or whatever it might be, you can also download copies of those optimized routes and can actually print those off. So there is a backup and a fail-safe in terms of offline access to this if that should ever become a requirement. The last thing I wanted to show you in terms of functional capability is just to take you down to the administration screen. So I'll draw your attention down to the bottom of the left-hand menu in the back office of My Council Services. And sitting in the administration screen is, as the name suggests, really where someone that was a super user of the platform, someone that's configuring different types of processes, managing the configuration of those processes, would spend a lot of their time. And that's really in the kind of admin and setup piece. And I'll just spin you down to a couple of bits. There's a whole waste configuration section, and it's an important point actually in terms of the philosophy that underpins the development of the My Council Services platform. Is as much as possible we try and make sure that every aspect of the platform can be configured by the council in day-to-day use, so that you're not constantly on the hook coming back to us every time you want to make a change. So as a quick example of that, if I click on collections, you can go in and you can configure different collection types. So if you suddenly have a change to the container type that you're deploying for a particular collection, you can go and just add a new collection type. We were looking actually at Missbin collection earlier, and I was showing you a set of rules that exist around that. So I'll just go into the garden collection type, and I'll just draw your attention down to the configuration capability around Missbin collection. So we've got a set of rules that we've created and wrapped around that collection process. And they said that on the day of collection, the customer is not allowed and cannot therefore physically report a bin as missed before 1 p.m. We allow up to 3 days after the collection for reporting, and that's inclusive of Saturdays and Sundays. And the idea is that, and this is a good example actually of how you can make quite a complex set of rules editable and manageable from the council perspective without necessarily needing access to specialist scripted skills and so on. So we're trying to make the platform as configurable as possible in its entirety. If I just jump back to that top level administration screen, I'll just very briefly give you some examples. You can look at the forms builder, so that you can build a form from scratch. You can use our forms store, so we offer a form store. So if you don't want to build forms from scratch, but you do want to create a form that is connected with Missbin reporting, and you could possibly search for that, and you could probably find examples of someone else that's already done that before you. So there's a whole bunch of examples from Winchester, from Ashford, from Blanagh, wherever it happens to be, where you can go and see examples of what customers have done previously, and you can borrow with pride. in that context, rather than having to necessarily define it from scratch. Very, very quickly, just to bring things, as we bring things to an orderly conclusion, a quick touch on reporting. You've got a whole bunch of dashboard reporting available to you, which is effectively real-time reporting at service request level. We touched on the reporting available from Service Desk, and there's also a whole suite of pre-configured reports under the Analytics tab. I'm conscious we're just on the half hour, so we've been going just about an hour now. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to finish things off with just a couple of slides. I'll just jump down and give you some last kind of pointers before we let you get on with the rest of your Tuesday morning. So advice to get started: you don't have to bite the whole thing off in one go. My Council Services can be implemented incrementally. You can plan things in phases, and that's quite a good idea, because you can start with some quick tactical wins and then plan for those longer term strategic goals. My Council Services is open, so it's quite easily and ready to be integrated with other third-party applications, be that payment gateway or other back office solutions. And the other thing I'd say, just to kind of temper our own enthusiasm, we're a technology company. We're obviously excited about technology, but technology is only part of the solution. There's an important element of process design. There's an important element of staff education around the way that you're digitizing processes. So you need to make sure that there's a technology component to your plan, but also kind of a hearts and minds and an education component to your plan. So that just remains for me to say thank you very much for joining today's webinar. I hope you found it useful. The recordings will be available. We'll also send slides out within the next 24, 48 hours. If you have got questions, our contact details are on the screen now. We're pretty easy to find on the internet, so don't hesitate to get in contact. Thank you for your time. I hope that you found that useful. Have a good Tuesday. Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.